Okay, hey guys. As we begin Romeo and Juliet, I want to start by just giving you some tips for tackling the language of Shakespeare. It is not always easy to understand. It's just different, right? We talked about that a little while ago, that the language is not difficult, it is different. But as it is different, there are some tips and tricks that you guys can use as you read along with me, as you read along and play with me. So let's go ahead and get started with it. The first one is to understand the structure. So the first thing you want to do is to find the subject and the verb to know where the completed thought ends. Sometimes Shakespeare puts the verb before the subject. Again, we talked about it a little bit in some of the previous videos, but the word order is sometimes a little bit different. For example, in fair Verona where we lay our scene, that's one of the lines from the prologue. What is the subject? Okay, the subject is we. What are we doing? What's the verb? We are laying our scene, okay? So we lay. What is being laid? The scene, like I just said. And so what's the line mean? It means that the setting is taking place in a place called Verona. Okay, so normally we would say we lay our scene in fair Verona, or we set the scene in fair Verona, but he words it a little bit differently. So you just kind of have to make sure that you're getting kind of the overall understanding of it rather than focusing on kind of word by word. So in fair Verona, where we lay our scene, again, we're setting the scene in fair Verona. Okay. The next one, sounding it out. What modern word does this word sound like? Misadventured. So you kind of sometimes notice that it has an apostrophe instead of an E there. Misadventured, we would normally have an E there. A lot of times in Shakespeare they do that, where you can see an example down there, table instead of table. They mean table. And so I think one of the reasons for that is there wasn't necessarily a standard spelling for a lot of things back in Shakespeare's day. And so that didn't really come around until there was like a formal dictionary. So you'll see some words that look very, very similar to a modern word. And so you can kind of safely assume that it's similar unless the meaning in the sentence just doesn't make sense. Okay. And for this particular word, think of the prefix miss. Okay, if you think about all the words that start with mistake, mismatch, they're all bad. And so using kind of your knowledge of prefixes and suffixes can help you understand the word as well. Misadventured means didn't go well, okay, or it's not going to go well. Okay, so the next one, build on what you know. Okay, so which words do you understand that will help you understand those which you don't? Okay, so using kind of context clues and the rest of the sentence can be helpful too. Two households, both alike in dignity. That is one of the lines from the prologue as well. What words do you know? You know the word two. Okay, that means literally two. Households, that would be two families. Both alike. Okay, they're very similar. In dignity. Now, I think most of you guys know what the word dignity means, but that's kind of a weird way to say things, right? Like two families both alike in dignity. That's not necessarily the way that we would say that. So at that point, you would probably go back to actually kind of thinking about what that word means. So if you think about dignity, it has to do with respect. So they're alike in respect. Okay, that kind of still doesn't totally make sense. So then you go, okay, respect has to do with a level of importance, and it has to do with kind of rank, right? You respect those who are kind of at a higher rank. And so then we could say two households both alike in rank. Okay, so then maybe they're on the same level in terms of respect within the community or financially or whatever. You guys see how we kind of worked there? And that is what it means. It means two households both alike in dignity. It's like they're kind of on the same level. Okay. Okay, so another thing that you can do when you're not sure what something means, table it. Okay, skip it for now. What unknown words will I table until I understand the main idea of this passage? Sometimes it's okay if you don't understand every single word that you read, as long as you're getting the big picture. Okay, the big picture is more important initially. Okay, when you're going to actually analyze the words and the lines, then maybe you want to go back and really dig deep with them. But your initial impressions of a scene or your initial impressions of a line or whatever, you want to get the big picture, okay? For example, whose misadventured, piteous overthrows. Okay, maybe I have no idea what that means, that might be one that I skip for now, and then I move on to a little bit later, okay? Which we will come back to in a second. Okay, guessing the meaning. Sometimes it's a good idea to just take a guess, right? So think about this one. The word traffic appears in the prologue, but they didn't have cars in Shakespeare's day. Maybe they had, little wagons and such. But traffic really wasn't traffic as we think of it, especially in LA. So what could that word mean? The line says, is now the 2 hours traffic of our stage. Well, traffic is essentially what we're busying ourselves with. Okay, so the traffic of our stage would be the business going on stage, which is essentially the play, right? The actors are performing a business on stage. So this is now the 2 hours traffic of our stage means that this is what's going on, or we are going to show you what's going on with what we're doing on stage. Okay. It's going to be the movement, kind of. Even though when we think of traffic, sometimes we think of lack of movement. They're actually thinking about movement in this case. Okay, obviously, consulting the experts is a really good way to figure out meaning. You guys have a version of the book that has lots of glossary definitions and kind of like footnotes and such. So what do the dictionary or glossary or text references say the definition is? For example, we mentioned the word piteous earlier. Okay, oddly enough, piteous has nothing to do with pity, even though that's what it kind of sounds like. Piteous is an adjective to describe passionate. Okay, so when you read that line, you kind of want to know that word in particular because it's not exactly the same as what you might think. Okay, and so that one would be in your book. It would say, hey, piteous means passionate. And so pay attention to those. Okay, it is important to get the joke. There are a lot of interesting, funny jokes in Shakespeare. What were the jokes of the time? What were the puns about? Oddly enough, they were mostly sex jokes. So a lot of sexual innuendos and a lot of the puns were related to that. And so as we read Romeo and Juliet together, there are a lot of really funny ones. I will do my best to point out a few early on, and then I'm probably just going to let you guys figure them out as we go, okay? But what is a pun? A pun is a play on words where you have multiple meanings of a word or similar sounding words, right? I'm a little chilly, coming from the chili itself, right? So in two ways, he is chilly, both cold and a literal chili. Okay, so that would be a play, or excuse me, a play on words or a pun. Getting the point. What are the key words in this line? What are the nouns and verbs? What main ideas do they express? What themes? Again, if I can kind of sum up everything I've been talking about so far, if you don't know every word as you go, it's okay. And that's going to frustrate some of you, and that's okay too. The main thing is to look for the big picture, to get the main idea first. Okay, if I'm going to ask you to paraphrase a series of lines, okay, then maybe I really want you to go kind of word by word, line by line. But for the most part, when you're reading Shakespeare, you really want to get the big idea first. Okay, make sure you have that, and then you can start to stress about some of the little things. Okay, I know that's going to be hard for quite a bit of you. And then just a cute little way to remember some ways to kind of get through the language. You can bard it. Remember that Shakespeare is known as the bard, right? So before asking an adult, bard it. Break open your book, right? Use what's in there. Use the resources that you have in your book. Ask each other for help, not answers, and that's important too. If you're like, man, I don't know what this means, ask a friend for help, but try not to just like copy each other's answers. I know that that's kind of a common thing nowadays, but let's try to avoid that, okay? It takes away a lot of the fun. Read the references, the sides of the book and glossary terms, and read the text again. So again, use the book. The first one is to break open your book, right? Like actually open it and read it and do your best, like kind of on your own. But R would be to then reference what resources you have there. And then D, don't forget the dictionary. Dictionaries are good. So crack open that dictionary and see what it can give you, okay? That's pretty much it. So let's get started with Romeo and Juliet.